President-elect Biden and President Trump are still separated by less than a point in Arizona. Right now, CBS News characterizes the presidential race in the state as leaning toward Mr. Biden. The Trump campaign has filed a lawsuit demanding a hand count of ballots it claims may have been incorrectly counted. Let's bring in CBS News campaign reporter Alex Tin. He's been covering the races in Arizona and Nevada. All right, Alex Tin, ye of little sleep and rest these days. So glad that you could be with us. Tell us more. Tell us more about this case. Why does the Trump campaign think some ballots were incorrectly counted?
Well, it all comes down to something called an overvote. That's when in Maricopa County, like in many jurisdictions all across the country, a voter goes in, fills out their ballot, goes to the tabulating machine, and the machine rejects the ballot, saying, hey, there are too many marks on this page. There are a couple reasons that could happen. It could be a stray mark, or in the case of the presidential election, if you bubble in two candidates instead of one, Joe Biden and President Trump, that would also bounce as a so-called overvote. Now, the Trump campaign claims that in these cases where their supporters were attempting to cast their ballots and the machine said, hey, we think there's an overvote on your ballot, that instead of doing what they should have done, which is to offer their supporters an opportunity to attempt to cast a brand new ballot, that instead poll workers either press the button for them or coerce them to press a button that would cast their ballots and essentially nullify their vote for this so-called overvote contest. Now, again, to be clear, local officials and state election officials both say that this suit is little more than a repackaged version of the so-called Sharpiegate conspiracy theory we heard a few days ago in Arizona, where some Trump supporters said that using Sharpies invalidated their ballots. But that's going to court soon, and we're probably going to hear a lot more about this in the coming days.
Alex, some people listening might wonder, though, are there enough potential ballots included that could change the outcome here?
Well, there is just barely enough ballots remaining to be counted in Arizona where this could potentially change the outcome. But to be clear, what they are asking for, the Trump campaign and the Arizona Republican Party, is a hand count of all of the ballots they think could have potentially been affected by this so-called overvote problem. While not officially a recount, a lot of their opponents, a lot of their critics, and obviously their opponents in court, the Secretary of State and the county recorder, think that this is an attempt to essentially backdoor in a recount of all the ballots that were cast in person in Arizona.
All right, let's turn to Nevada. Over the weekend, CBS News projected that Joe Biden will win the state of Nevada. On Monday, President Trump said the state was a, quote, cesspool of fake votes. How are officials in Nevada reacting to that?
Well, again, like in Arizona, to be clear, in Nevada, both state officials and local officials tell local outlets, have told basically anyone who has asked, we do not think that there is evidence of widespread voter fraud in that state. Now, the key word there is widespread. What the Trump campaign and state Republicans point to are what they say are several clear examples of what they would call illegitimate or improper votes. One such example is a voter who we know passed away in 2017, and yet when you look in the records of the mail ballots, apparently cast his mail ballot for this election. But again, the operative word here is widespread. There have been cases of illegitimate votes in the past. Last year, for example, a registered Republican in Arizona, was sentenced for voting for both in Arizona and Nevada for the 2016 general election. It's yet to come out any evidence that that is any more than a single one-off aberration. And it's the same in this case. We have yet to see any clear evidence that this is evidence of widespread or systematic voter fraud. But the Trump campaign and Nevada Republicans certainly have plenty of examples they say are situations in which at least illegitimate vote counting occurred.
All right, so bottom line here, Alex, how many more votes still need to be counted in these states?
Well, in both states, what we're remaining with right now are essentially the hardest ballots, a very, very small fraction of the total ballots that were cast in the election. Some examples of the ballots that are remaining: damaged ballots, ballots cast by disabled voters, and in Nevada, ballots that still need curing, whether, it's a potential signature mismatch or the voter still needs to come in and provide some additional identification to prove that they are indeed eligible to cast a ballot in this election. But again, it is a very, very small pool of votes. In fact, the pool is so small that even though the Republican Senate candidate in Arizona, Martha McSally, has yet to call to concede the race to her Democratic challenger, now the Senator-elect Mark Kelly, there are now less ballots left to count than there are in the gap between her and Mark Kelly in that Senate race.
Okay, wow, got it. Alex Tin, I know you have been going nonstop. I'm really glad you could join us today. Thank you so much.
Glad to be here.